Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of Catching-101 TV. As always, super excited for today's guest. This is a guy who I've known on social media for a while. Got to meet him in person at the ABCA convention last year, but a former professional catcher. And now he runs a facility called Midwest Catching Academy. And you also may know his voice from the Mound Visit podcast, which has come out fairly recently, but these guys are taking the catching world by storm and staying busy and having a lot of catching conversations. So without further ado, let's welcome CJ Medlin.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So, CJ, like I said, I know I gave a brief bio, but anytime we do these things, I kind of like to start off by letting you introduce yourself and just kind of give us a little history about your background, you know, how you grew up in baseball and how you got to where you are today, just so the listeners that are maybe being introduced to you for the first time get to know a little bit more about you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as Zan said, my name's CJ Medlin. Live here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, born and raised. Grew up in a small town called Broken Arrow. Graduated from Owasso High School. Went to Seminole State Junior College, then Alabama for a brief bit. Was signed by the Chicago Cubs. Played with them for 3 to 4 years, and then I was lucky enough to play with the Brewers for a while. Got up to AAA for a bit. Career knee injury, but had some good seasons. Played with a lot of guys that are still currently in the big leagues. A lot of good connections with guys there. Caught for 20 plus years since I started. I was about 8 years old. The guy that got me into catching was none other than Pudge himself, Yvonne Rodriguez. From the bits of English that he could speak back then when he was with the Tulsa Drillers, that's when I learned catching and getting baseball thrown at me as hard as he possibly could, and just said wear it and take it. So that's how I kind of got into it all.
That's cool. So did you actually get to know him, or did you just watch it growing up watching his games, or what?
No, we were able to create some kind of a small relationship. My father had tickets to Drillers games every night, and we'd always go. Back in the day where you could show up early to the games, the gates were open as they were taken in and out, and BP and everything else. And we kind of befriended some of the guys there that were roommates together, kind of like they have host families out there, but we just kind of grew a connection and got to the point to where they'd let me come out early day on the field and work out with them every day when I was younger. So I'd get there out of school early, or my dad would pull me out of school early. We'd go up there to the ballpark early and get down there in the field, play catch with them all, and just have fun with it. So
That's awesome. That's one of those deals that I'm sure it was cool at the time, and I'm sure you had a blast and learned a lot. But now looking back, being able to say you got to work with Pudge, I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah, no, that was definitely something I like you said, at that point in time, you don't realize the magnitude of the situation, because within about a month and a half of he was there, he was getting called up to go to Texas. And I was like, hey, cool, I know Pudge. And then all of a sudden we're going down to Texas to work with him off and on every now and then and see him. But it's like, I'm 9, 10, like, okay, cool, I'm working with Pudge, and like we're at Rangers ballpark, and it's like, holy crap, this guy's in the big leagues, and I'm actually here working with these guys. And then you look back at it years later, like, wow, that was actually something kind of cool that not a lot of guys are going to get a chance to do.
Yeah, that's pretty insane. So I actually grew up a Pudge fan too, and I think you and I are fairly close in age. But I grew up, I had an aunt that lived in the Dallas area, so we'd go vacation or spend a week with her every summer, and we'd always try to catch at least one Rangers game. So by default, I was a Rangers fan, and Pudge was my guy. And I remember watching him throw for the first time I got to see him play in person when he threw the ball to second. It gave the definition of frozen rope a new meaning. I mean, it was, you see him on video and you see the guys throw now, and don't get me wrong, there's some great throwers, but he's got to be one of the best of all time. That guy had an absolute cannon.
The story that I've got was super cool. It was right before they were setting up for BP and before they were pulling the turtle shell out after they just got done taking in and out. And Juan Gonzalez, Julio Franco, and Rafael Palmeiro, which these are all big league guys, you're thinking of now, like back then, okay, cool, whatever. But they were trying to throw the ball from home plate over the center field wall at Old Driller Ballpark, which if anybody that's listening to this knows Old Driller Ballpark, the way center field fence was, it was 405 or 410 to center with at least a 25, 30-foot wall, right? And they're trying to throw this thing. They're one hopping it to the fence or two hopping it to the fence. Fred Sampson, who was a good friend of ours, a good friend of Pudge, was his roommate, yells him to get back there. He doesn't take a big crow hop, nothing huge. He just gets out there from a squat, jumps on the right foot, and lets it go, throws it over the center field wall on just a climb, just completely going out. And it was one of those things like it was the coolest thing ever. Well, then that same night, he had backpicked a guy at first base from his knees, just a quick snap throw. It was almost like a no look, and it was all over the news. And everybody's like, "We've never seen this before," and it was just like instantaneously, like the lore of Pudge. There you go.
Yeah, that guy, he was fun to watch. It still is fun to go
Mhm.
back and watch his clips. So really cool.
Oh,
I actually
absolutely.
didn't know you got to know him that well. So
Yep.
pretty cool. But man, so the reason I wanted to have you on here is one, just to have a conversation, and I know we've spoken a number of times online and in person a little bit, but just to get to know you and kind of see what's going on at Midwest Catching Academy. I want you to go into a little more detail and tell everybody about your facility first, because I want to make sure I want it to be justice to be done, because I know how nice
Yeah.
it is.
Absolutely.
But just go into kind of a little bit about your facility, kind of what you do, and then your overall approach on training guys. Then we can kind of get more into the specifics from there.
Absolutely. So Midwest Catching Academy was originally started out as three guys, myself, Kyle Rote, and Jackson Williams, who, if you're familiar with that name, Jackson Williams, he was in the big leagues for a little bit back and forth between the Giants and the Rockies. So kind of the three of us culminated an idea going, there's nothing in our areas detailed enough to catching in our area. So we got together, put a brainstorm together and go, let's take our knowledge, let's start developing it. Let's go out there. Let's do some camps. Let's do some clinics. Let's start traveling around and trying to help kids that don't have this in their area. So it started out by us getting called to come to San Antonio, come to Missouri, go to Kansas and different places to put on camps that they don't have anybody in those areas doing instruction. So we go down and build up a following to that point. Nothing on social media really big at that point, just kind of people we know calling us and bringing it up. And fast forward about 2 years into it, we have a following. We have a setup with some memberships of people saying, if you guys have your own place, we'll come straight to you. Well, next thing you know, I got some guys from some friends of ours that from California, New Mexico, flying up to come work out with us. And we're like, no, I need to get a place set. So we all sat down and then put a model together and a plan together to create kind of a school or an academy idea to where guys can come in and we can create a block to where, okay, hey, you're coming in. This is where you're at. This is where you're at in your skill set. These are the drills we've got developed for you to work on. You're going to work with our strength coach or our movement specialist, and we're going to work on your mobility, everything else prior to your functional training work as far as receiving, blocking, throwing. But then we just create it like you're going to go to school. You've got things to work on daily. You come into here, you get your work in, get it done, get out, no messing around. Have a little fun here and there, but places to come in and get your work in and get serious and work with like-minded guys. And that's been a great success with us so far, because we've seen a lot of the people in the market come in that didn't know this was here, didn't know it was an option. And now we're starting to reap the benefits of not just the younger guys, the youth guys, but now college athletes that come back home for an off season or winter break or summer. They got a place to come to. Our pro guys that come back, especially with all the stuff that just happened now with the COVID shutdown and guys need a place to train. It's been huge because guys didn't have this access because we're 24/7 facility, but we can privatize that for some of those pro guys that come in that want to get their work in and get out, and allow that access to them.
Well, and like I said, I'll put your information below where everybody can find you on social media and your website as well. But for those who maybe aren't familiar with it, it's an unbelievably nice facility. I'll be honest. So I've had the same idea. I'd love to have my own facility at some point. Right now I live in Kentucky, and we're probably in a temporary location. We'll be in for a few more years. So I don't have a place here, but maybe eventually when I get to my final destination, wherever that'll be a few years down the road, I'll have a place similar. But I don't want you to get mad at me if I'm going to steal some of your ideas because it's so nice. So hey, I want you to take it as a compliment.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And that was the thing that we all talked about too, Kyle and Jackson. We don't want to follow the footsteps, and excuse me when I say this here, is the hitting Twitter groups of guys that get so, excuse the word, but pissed off with, this guy or that guy or this and that and this philosophy, that philosophy. This is the way we do it. This is the way you should do it. if somebody wants to take something that we've got here and an idea, man, all for it, because we want the catching atmosphere, not just locally, but nationally or worldly, to grow, because there has been, and if you look back at it, how many kids steer away from catching, you know, as they get older, or they're younger, they get just abused and beaten up because somebody doesn't know what they're doing, and the lack of catching just goes down, or quality catching goes down, you know. And I hate that for the position, because, you know, there's so many things going on now that are changing, and so on and so forth. But man, if we got ideas here, somebody wants to use it, man, by all means, absolutely. Now, if there's something that was proprietary, sure, we're not going to just blast it out there and let somebody see it. But I'm always up for, how can we help catching get better everywhere? I mean, I will obviously want to start ourselves to succeed and everything else, but the catching as a whole has to grow. It needs to. There's so much hitting, pitching, fielding, everything else that's out there, you know, and the catching, I feel like in the last few years is really kind of starting to make a good surge, which is great, because I think as a whole we need it in the community 100%. So
yeah, I agree with you completely. You know, in the past couple of years, it seemed like there were very few, you know, catching guys or catching coaches or however you want to, catching instructors, whatever you want to call it, around, and not even just on social media, but I mean just around the country. You'd be surprised, and I'm sure you're the same way. If I go down to Florida, you know, for a tournament or a camp or whatever it is, I'm amazed at how many people reach out to me like, man, you got to put on a camp down here. There's no catching guys down here. And I don't mean that disrespectful to the catching guys, you know, in Florida.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm just using that as an example. There's just not a ton of people around. Now there's getting to be more. But what I think you're doing is neat, because there are people who have done similar things, just kind of with a little bit different specificity. You know, take Eric Cressy, for example. I know Eric Cressy, you know, in his facilities, they work with, you know, all athletes and it's not just pitchers. They're probably most known for pitchers. I think the same thing is probably true for the driveline guys. You know, they work with a lot of different guys, but they're probably most known for pitchers. But there's not a catching specific facility out there, or there hasn't been, from what I know of. I know there's a lot of facilities that may cater to some guys, but it seems like you guys have really built it around catchers, which I think is cool. And I know you've put on a number of, you know, camps and clinics and things like that over the past year, because we've been in touch about a couple of them. So definitely keep up the good work with that.
Thank you.
One of the things that I think is really interesting is, and I think it's very much needed, is just kind of taking a holistic approach. You know, it's more than just lessons. You know, don't get me wrong, catching instruction is very important. But if you want to, you know, if you really want to succeed, you have to build a base of, you know, strength and flexibility and mobility and conditioning and all that sort of stuff. And you guys kind of have it all under one roof. So I know you kind of hit on it a little bit, but I'd like for you to speak a little bit more about, you know, kind of just the program you have. Let's say I'm a new catcher and I show up to work with you on day one. What would the approach be? You know, would I first get mobility tested, or would you put me through what type of analysis, or what would you do? Kind of what would the trajectory be for a new athlete on day one?
So for us, or for myself specifically, when I get a new catcher in, or somebody that's especially very green, somebody that's never even really caught before in general, my first step I take with a guy is, honestly, let's just see how they're going to set. Seeing how they're going to set up on their own allows me, and I can get our movement specialist or our strength coach to come over and look at it with me as well, because that's really where they detail their work and seeing things that I don't see. You know, where they see limitations, you know, which our guy calls it a PLA, which is a performance limitation assessment, where he's going to have be potentially prone to injury in a certain way or a certain setup, or where he looks at right away. So having them just sit at first, is whether just a traditional setup, or they want to go to one knee, whatever they've seen on TV, or if they've worked on a little bit before, what feels more natural to them right away, is letting them show me what they do before we just try to tinker with anything else. It's kind of like the idea is, you know, I can't just take something and go fix it without knowing what's there first and foremost, because not everybody's built the same. Even though we can see their structure on the outside, how they're built, we don't know internally how they're built, how well they're going to move, how well they're going to function, until we see them actually move and do things we need them to do as a catcher. So I'll put them through a gauntlet at first, honestly, and not, you know, if they're younger, be a little bit easier with them, not so just abrupt. But our older guys, we want to see, hey, how do we move, receiving, blocking? Let's just see our footwork. Let's just kind of see how you move as a whole, as an individual now, before we start making things fit to you and then making your body be able to work the way it needs to be successful.
Well, I think that's cool, and it seems like that's kind of the approach that more people are taking now, where it's just a more individualized approach. You know, where let's say when you and I were growing up, if we went to a catching camp or a catching instructor, we're probably going to get very similar instruction. And I still think there's, there are many foundations and many pillars that that are true across the board. But I think one thing that's happening now, which is cool to see, is it's a lot more individualized, So if I may be really tight in my ankles, but you may be really tight in your hips, or maybe you've got great mobility and I have imbalances there. So I think that's cool. I think it's important to see that happen, just see guys getting actually, measured and analyzed first before we
Right.
ask them to do some things, especially with all the new stuff that's kind of going on with the different stances and all that sort of stuff. So definitely
I think
interesting.
that's something that we see a lot too. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all right. What do you see a lot of?
I say, so we see a lot too of the kids that come in that they've been catching for a year or two, or they're 13, 14, 15, but they're really picking up on just what they see on TV, you get those kids that try to work their own or work on themselves and just model what they see on TV, which is great, but without understanding how they're really supposed to do it or why they're doing it. It helps to an extent, but when they come in and they're not focusing on other areas to get more mobility out of what they're actually trying to do. They just set up. Mm-hmm. They don't think of all the stuff that goes behind what that guy in the big leagues is setting, what he's doing. You look at JT Realmuto and how mobile that guy is. You watch the athleticism that kid has. Is not everybody's going to be a JT. Not everybody's going to be, a Tucker Barnhart. Not everybody's going to be a Jan Gomes. Everybody's built differently, but they see these things and like, well, I like the way he sets up. Buddy, that's not going to work for you right now. And they all don't see it that way, and that's why when I said no offense to the hitting Twitter stuff, is that everybody's got their individuality. I mean, like you and I, we might be fairly similar in heights or builds right now, but we're not going to catch the exact same way. We might have a same idea of a one knee set, but we might set a little bit more internally rotated with our hips or externally rotated with our hips, or right foot a little bit more forward or backwards. It just depends. But I think that's where a lot of translation gets lost, is because there hasn't been a lot of individualizing per groups. When you say those big camps, is because they work with these kids. Yeah, great. And okay, these are working good, but that finite detail that some of these kids get lost in that they don't think about is I need to be specific for myself versus, what everybody else I'm seeing.
Yeah. And that's a good segue into one of the next things I want to talk about, which you played pro ball for longer than I did. But again, we're about the same age. What would you say are some of the major differences or some of the big umbrellas that are different about catching instruction now that you see when you were playing, even in professional baseball not too long ago?
Oh man, the little more of the old school mentality is not what it used to be, as far as just to sit and get hits and rapid fires every day with the machine and just take the bruises every day, home every day. And you hear a lot more guys talking about more of, not just the ballsy mentality of being a catcher, but the aptitude of, really understanding the details of how you receive, how you block, what makes you a better receiver and why. But everything's not it's you don't just get up behind the machine and they just load up 50 pitches in a row and just receive over and over and over, which those things are great to for time and again to work on reactions and things to do to have some fun. But I don't know if it's as detailed as it was then as it is now, per individual, because you get in spring training, you've got minor league camp, you might have 15, 16 guys in your special defensively work, and you're trying to get through within your 30 to 40 minutes. Well, the catching coordinator doesn't have enough time to go with each guy individually to work on each specific detail, where I think now that's starting to get that way a little bit more, where I think they might take some guys off to the side or give them something to work on and come back and work on this here and there. But I think that's probably the biggest thing I've seen is the old school mentality to just get back there, grind it, go, and versus the really specified detail work that guys are getting into nowadays is, I think that's the biggest difference I've seen so far. I think, which is great for the game too, because guys really take time to break down their craft. Because I really think it is a craft. You know, there's not a lot of guys that can do what we do as catchers, or those elevated catchers do at the elite levels, and it really is, you know, detailing something you do to a higher level than somebody else, and it takes the guts to want to do it in the first place.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple takeaways from that for me. And again, maybe my experience isn't like everyone's experience, but when I was with the Braves, our catching coordinator was Chino Kadahia, and he was also the field coordinator. So what that means for the people who are, you know, not as familiar with pro ball, he's for the most part in charge of minor league spring training. So he's a busy dude. He's got a lot going on. He would definitely spend time with us. But what I see now is a lot more organizations are hiring maybe a catching coach at the big league level. They also have a catching coordinator, and a lot of these guys have assistant catching coordinators as well. Where, like I said, when I was playing, there was one guy, and he was split between, and there's just not as much. So that's a positive thing that I've seen. I'm going to have to go back and look at it again. A couple of years ago, I looked at the statistic, or just went through literally every major league roster, and there were 8 major league teams that had a specified catching coach on staff. And that was about, I think that was about 3 years ago. So I've got to update that and go through it now, but I'd be willing to bet that it's got to be half now. I mean, I bet it's at least doubled, maybe even more than that. So that's one thing. And then, you know, I know a lot of times it's easy to sound like the old grumpy guy, like, oh, the guys aren't as tough now today as we used to be, and that sort of stuff. But there are differences in the way guys are trained. And I think some of it's good, and I think maybe some of it's bad. For me personally, you know, you talk about just, you know, getting beat up and wearing balls and doing tons of blocking off machine and that sort of stuff. I think you can gain some mental toughness from that. But, you know, I think we're also a little bit smarter. You know, we're trying to be smarter with the workload as well. So it's kind of a fine balance is what I see.
I think what you said right there is probably the best key difference is the detailing of the workload to the guys, is understanding the quality versus the quantity, or how intense to take it to each guy, or for how long. You know, I mean, I think that's the biggest deal. Is like our group of guys, when we bring them in, if we do a group session, once we start getting more acclimated in our work together individually, I start putting guys into groups. So instead of having one guy for an hour, which you can probably go over 2 topics in an hour with a catcher and really hit on 2 things, and it can take a full hour. But once you get consistent with your work and your detail, and you're getting better, you don't need a full hour just to get worn out, versus, 30 minutes, or, you know, the 30 to 45 minutes. And then you get, you know, guys in a group to go for an hour together, where everybody's sharing the workload together, but learning and feeding off of each other at the same time. And then you kind of like go back into the, you know, the rapid fire drills, and then build it up and still build a mentality with it all. But I think that's probably one of the good things too. And I think where I learned that, which one of my favorite catching coordinators ever to this day is Charlie Green. And I love that dude. And I think he was the one for me that I saw start detailing the idea of catching when I got to Milwaukee when he came over there, because he was first with us with Scott Service with the Cubs as like an assistant. And then when I got to Milwaukee, he ended up going to Milwaukee as well. So I get to have him for both clubs I was with, which was fantastic. And the dude's a genius. But he finds the way to get the best out of each individual versus making everybody seem they have to do it a certain way through the entire organization. And I think that's where I first learned that the idea of, you said, the workload is understanding smarter, not harder, kind of an idea.
Yeah. And you know, he's one of the most well-respected guys out there. He's been doing it for a long time, and his name is very well respected. So that's a good point. And that's something else I wanted to ask you about, which kind of leads me in to the Mound Visit podcast. So you guys started a podcast probably a couple of months ago. And you guys have been cranking out content like crazy. I'll be honest, I've listened to a lot of them. I haven't listened to all of them yet, because I know it seems like there's some week where 3 episodes come out, and you guys go on and on, which is awesome. But what you just said is, you just mentioned a couple guys who are influences on you. What I'm curious to know is, you know, now that you're on this side of the coaching career, and you're surrounding yourself with other guys who are, you know, current big league catchers, other well-respected catching coaches, how has just surrounding yourself and kind of diving right in to that, that situation? How has that changed maybe your approach to working with guys, or what have you learned, or what are just some things that you've kind of taken away, as you've really, just dove right into this catching world and, surrounding yourself with more guys like that?
No, I think one of the biggest things so far is seeing everybody's side to how they train guys. Their mentality, thought behind it. Like when I got the chance with Ryan Sienko, when he's come up to our camp and stuff, and sit and talk to him about the way he goes about his work ethic with guys. How to get the absolute best out of each individual catcher, and learning how he does it and how he speaks to him, how he talks to him, and there's the way I like the way he does a lot of very positive workload with them, or positive mindset work with them, and to understand, hey, this game's going to be tough. It's going to beat you up. It's going to eat you up. It's going to spit you out. I mean, you just got to learn to find the positives in every single thing you can do with that, but then also apply that to your work, so that way you're getting a positive feedback for each thing as well. But every guy that we've come across, and you included, listening to stuff that you do and stuff that you've taught guys, and hearing you speak, allows me to learn different avenues to speak to each individual athlete I come across, because there's so many different mindsets and mentalities and the way kids are going to interpret things, or there might be a word that clicks with a kid, that might not click with another kid. So you hear different verbiage and terminology, to how they express maybe the same ideas, which I think a lot of us in the catching community have a lot of the same ideas or values or core values to the way things are done, but terminologies might be said a little bit differently, or how a guy gets there might be done a little bit differently, but that can be broken down to somebody else that I've never come across. And learning ideas that I didn't realize how much I probably said I was maybe against the one knee for a while, but when I went back and looked at some of my old videotapes when I played, how often I went to a one knee and didn't even realize it. I just did it. But nobody ever said anything, because I was still receiving the ball well, or I was blocking the ball well, or throwing well, so nobody griped and complained about it. But when I'd come back, some of the guys around here were like, well, I would never teach a kid that, because it just means they're lazy, or you can only do that because you're a pro guy and you can do this. I'm like, I didn't realize I do it. I just do it, but I don't teach kids that, because it's just not what we were really taught growing up to do. I just did it. So, yeah. But the value of how many guys embrace that now, if it's different, it's okay if it's different, because it might work. I mean, that guy looks different doing it, but it works really well and it gets him to where he needs to go. I mean, so be it. I mean, everybody's going to have their own way, and yeah, there's certain way it seems that everybody's got to get to, but I think that's the whole niche of all the guys that we've been surrounding ourselves with, and in myself as well, is understanding that there's key points everybody's got to get to, but how the guy gets there, where I think we're all on the same page. It's like, however he gets there, he gets there. If it works for him, it works for him. That's been great to hear that from that standpoint, because these guys are, what makes that dude the best? Let him be the best he can be, Yeah. Don't mold him to an idea. Mold the idea to him to make it work, make it adapt to that guy.
That's a good way to put it. And, I'll be honest. So you guys have cranked out a lot more, podcasts than I've done of this type setup. But I honestly feel there's a couple of reasons I do it. One is so I get to hang out with guys and just talk catching. It gives me a chance to talk catching, and I get to learn some. But two, I like learning from other people. I feel like every time I have a conversation, I walk away as a better coach. I mean, I have 10 conversations with 10 different catching coaches. And like you say, sometimes we try to say the same things, but the terminology is different, or we use different words in a different way. And it helps me get a better understanding of what other guys are teaching. And I feel like that really, it helps me as a coach. Like I said, and lastly, I think it's good to share these conversations with the public, because, one of the first things you said about the, about your facility is you're trying to improve the entire game of catching, not just the guys in your area, but it's good to share this with people all over the place. So I know I'm better from having conversations like this, and I feel like everybody kind of feels the same. So I appreciate you guys sharing your conversations. And that's interesting. I do want to take a little time and get a little bit more into maybe some of the specifics of what you teach. And it's funny you talk about Ryan Sienko, because I actually had a call with him yesterday, and his episode will be out a little bit later this week, and then yours will follow it by a couple of days. But he's got a lot of good ideas. But as far as, let's just start off with receiving. We've talked about stances a little bit, not gone into a ton of detail, but I'm curious to know. I always like to get people's, philosophy. And I know we could talk all day about what do you like receiving, what do you expect, what do you do. But if you kind of had to give me the elevator pitch in a minute or two, what would you say are some of the key highlights for you that if you're working with guys, what do you think are the most important things?
So the first thing I want to tell a guy is like the key importance for me is I want my pocket to be on point or pocket awareness to that ball as long as possible. If I can keep my pocket online or beat that ball to the spot as early as possible with my pocket facing that ball, I'm going to give myself the best chance to receive that pitch the best way possible. Now, the idea where we talk about, guys kind of getting the elbow to work up, working low to high, getting the pocket online. I try to use a lot of visuals with guys as far as the trajectory of the ball, where the glove needs to set, stuff like that. So I use the idea or the analogy of, if I'm a middle infielder or if I'm an infielder, how do I backhand the ball? But I want to backhand the ball as if I'm receiving it every pitch. That way it gives me the strongest position with my arm or in the chain with my body to be the strongest way to control the pitch without it controlling me so much that my pocket stays strong, not necessarily stiff or hard to it, but firm but soft analogy to where I'm soft enough to receive every pitch, but that way I'm not letting it take me out of the zone. But I want to work everything from low to high because I'm going to move quicker, smoother from that trajectory up versus up to down. So that way I work my glove angle. The first few things is we're going to work on a pick process. I'm going to work on picking the ball, little short hop skips, which I think some guys have probably seen that. On a video we posted last week with a couple of kids I worked with, and Salvador Perez is big, huge for some of the stuff. He's shown the same way doing that, where you work a pick block variation with that as well to really understand your pocket awareness to where it's at in relationship to the ball.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like that, man. I'm a fan of that. I think that's a good analogy, kind of comparing guys to infielders. When it comes to this and the pocket awareness stuff, it seems like a lot of guys that I speak to who are trying to teach pocket awareness, or they're trying to get players to have a better understanding for it. Some of them like to do barehanded stuff. Some of them like to use training mitts. Are there any tools or implements that you really like, or that you found to be really beneficial to those guys?
Yeah, so I'll do a shameless plug real quick, since we are partnering with All-Star and a lot of things. So we use the smallest one they have, the CM100, to work on that area to where I understand I want that ball to work between my index finger and thumb to where that pocket's really going to be sitting at. Excuse me. And then we'll use that little web, the blue finger web glove, and toss the little hard wiffle balls at guys and have them working the same aspect with it. And we'll go right into the regular glove and do skips. Yeah. I love barehand work and everything else as well, but at the same time, I like how realistic can I be in a game feel work. If I have a glove on my hand and I can work drills that way, I'm going to get an overall sense of really where I need to be because I have that glove on my hand the entire time. Now, barehand work, I love it. Great. Teaches them to be soft, relaxed. But I think when you add that glove back to it, you add a difference of, a real situation to them. Every single drill, the skips, the hops, everything that you're going to work through, that glove's going to be what they use in that game. So if I can make it as realistic as possible on every single rep, then I can be more confident in my overall movements every single time.
Yeah. Well, I would echo that. I mean, I'm a big fan of All-Star as well, and I know those guys well. It's a great company. I'll plug them as well. I mean, they make some of the best gear out there, I think. So those guys do a fantastic job, and I like a lot of their mitts. I'm kind of with you. So as far when it comes to barehand stuff, I'm not a huge fan of barehand drills. I'm not going to say there's not a time and place for them, but it's definitely not my go-to drill. If I'm working with the player for the first time, the first thing I do, we're not just going to default to barehand drills. Now, again, there may be a situation where we need to do some of that, but I prefer guys to do work with mitts on their hand. I just think it's more beneficial. So I like the pocket, the small one, the pocket, or the focus framer.
Yep.
I like the equalizer, which is like the half web. I've seen a lot of guys using the keyhole. I don't have one of those yet. Do you guys have one?
We've got one. Yeah.
You like it?
I use that more with some of my younger guys, like the 9, 10, like the guys are just now getting to like a kid pitch world that don't understand that, hey, I'm going to have to catch this ball, not slap at it and pancake it, and use it with those guys. So they really understand that feel of working in that direction to have that pocket there. But I like it a lot for the younger kids in that generation, because you're trying to teach them movement pathologies anyway. So if I can teach them something in a movement that trains that movement for them to understand it, and they can visually see feedback, which our deal with younger kids is the moment they see feedback, they oh, I'm excited, I'm positive, I see it, I'm doing, let's go. Well, that glove gives them automatic feedback that I caught the ball right, I'm moving in the right position, and they're going to feel more confident, which, not to sugarcoat it for them, but they see, hey, I'm doing it right, let's keep moving forward. So that's where I really like that glove for those kids.
Well, I think there's a lot of value in that. I mean, for me, there's some mitts that I use a lot more. I don't particularly use the donut very much. And again, I know some guys really like it, and hey, more power to you. That's just not one that I use as much in my training. I've always kind of had the analogy, and if you've ever been to one of my camps or you've heard me teach or whatever, I think they're a lot like golf clubs. The training mitts are very good, but like you just mentioned about the keyhole, sometimes they have a very specific purpose that's, you're in the sand and you need your sand wedge. There's a specific purpose that you need it for, and they're kind of one dimensional. I don't mean that necessarily in a bad way. But I like the focus framework, because you can do a lot with it, whether you got to pick balls or receive or catch, or, there's a lot of things you can do with it, but then the other ones are a little bit more, that's my 6-iron. I can use that anywhere. But then the other ones are a little bit more one dimensional. So I'm with you on that. And again, I think we both feel comfortable plugging All-Star. Those guys are great equipment, but a great company and great family over there.
Absolutely. 100%.
What about do you use the Anvil any, their weighted mitt?
I do. Yes, absolutely. That, for guys that haven't developed enough strength in their forearms or their wrist to keep the glove up long enough or to control pitches, I'll use a mixture of the Anvil with like a 1 pound or a 2 pound driveline ball or something that's a plyo ball I can use with them to throw it. And it knocks them on their butt or it knocks their hand back. But when I switch from there right to their regular glove and then go with the same weighted ball, then we take the weighted ball back. So like a progression of going and decreasing weight, they learn how to keep that strength of that wrist and that hand back better, versus just letting that, when kids are young, that glove might weigh their hand down and they can't hold it up long enough. So I'll use that with a lot of younger guys or some of the older guys that have, which our strength coach brought this art is like guys that have had either maybe an injury or been in a cast or something, and they're coming back and needing to work on strengthening the forearm and the wrist and working in that area. He goes, it's a great tool for that, because they've got to learn to get back in that flexion and that movement to strengthen that part of their forearm. Or if they, something they have an injury or whatever the case is, they can work on that to help rebuild that area to create or recondition them back to proper playing to get in the right position with where they need to be at, so they don't create a bad habit.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that. I can get on board with that. It seems like as catching coaches right now, as a catching coach community, we're infatuated with receiving, because, we have the new statistics and that's that's the sexy statistic right now. That's the one that's the trendy thing. Guys want to be good receivers. And I think that's awesome, because, for a long time, there's been no way to measure it. But as I talk to players, sometimes I know a lot of high school players specifically, they still feel like they get evaluated a lot of times on their pop time. They go to a showcase and, maybe a coach has a trained eye, maybe they don't, but when they're recruiting a guy, they get evaluated on how do they swing the bat and how do they throw. So when it comes to throwing, what are some of the things maybe you teach your guys, to improve their pop time, or what type of program would you put them on? Do you start with mobility stuff, or do you start with the long toss program, or what do you kind of do there?
Well, our first thing we do with our guys, we talk about them throwing, is I flat out tell them, like, look, don't go out trying to be a 1.8 or a 1.9 guy right out of the chute, because if you do, your mechanics are going to go right down the crapper, because you don't know what you're trying to do yet. If you're a 2 flat guy and your mechanics are sound and on point and it's on the bag, be a 2 flat guy. If you're a 205 guy, be a 205 guy. If it's on the bag and you're going to throw guys out, if your pitcher gives you a chance, that's where we're going to be. But now we're going to work on everything we can to be the most efficient, the quickest, work on our arm strength, understand that I'm going to have limitations. It doesn't matter. You might go out to somebody's showcase somewhere and you might somehow throw a 183 or 18 or 179. Like I've seen one. That's a whole nother topic I can get onto another rant, but but that doesn't mean you throw 17s and 18s. That means the moon, the stars, and everything aligned properly for you to make that ball get out quick enough as possible to throw it right on top of the bag, and nothing happened that was wrong, and it was just beautiful. Now, can you create that to happen consistently? Maybe, but are you consistently in the 9s to 205 or a 2 to 21? Understand where you're at and be realistic with yourself. So as we work, don't go, oh man, I threw a 1-9 that day. Why am I not staying in the 1-9s every day? Well, you're not a 1-9 guy. Not yet, but maybe you could be, but you're not just a 1-9 guy. That looks great. That means you've got the potential to be there, but understand we're going to work to bring that gap as close as we possibly can between your average and your best. Yeah. So everything we're going to do from that point is going to mimic and work towards that main goal. So I'll have them go through to backtrack all this. I'll have them go through an assessment with our trainer to go through their mobility in their lower half, their trunk rotation movement, how well their arm moves, what their scap load's like, if they've got any pre-existing or impingements or movements like that before I put them on some kind of a throwing program to work on building arm strength. Because I think that's the worst thing I can do as a coach is go, okay, all right, I see you do this. We need to build up your arm strength. Okay, here's what I'm going to have you go do. Well, I may not know that kid might have a possible injury or a soreness somewhere in a labrum or a lat or elbow and just not say anything. Well, I can have them go through our training and go, hey, he's deficient here, or he's got a weak external rotation in his IR or whatever the case is. And all these other things that can play into the development side is, okay, well, he's going to lose 4 miles an hour because he's got a weak internal rotation on his backside. He can't maintain that external rotation to stay strong or to drive off of it. Well, I'm not going to go say, okay, here's the program. If we can't control this, everything else we're going to do is irrelevant. Because if I can't get this built up in the right and the lower half, then everything I do up here, I'm not worried about it because my lower half has got to be fixed first. So if I'm not strong here, no matter what I do after that, it's going to build up the chain. So if I start from the ground up and build that, then that's going to be where I'm going to make myself most efficient as a thrower.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I like kind of the setup you guys have is you have all these people under one roof. You have a trained eye with the throwing mechanics and the footwork and the mechanical type stuff, but you've also got, strength coaches who can assess your mobility, issues or deficiencies or whatever you want to call them. Because they're related, they're very related. Mm-hmm. And I feel like a lot of guys, sometimes they overlook that. I know for the last couple of years, I feel like I've been preaching it to anybody who will listen, and maybe a lot of people who don't want to listen.
Absolutely.
But hip mobility and ankle mobility is a very big part of being able to get in good positions, and not just get in good positions, but be strong in the right positions.
Absolutely.
So that there's a difference between just flexibility and having stability as well. So I like that approach. When it comes to maybe improving a guy's footwork, do you have any particular drills or anything you like to do around that? Is there anything that you really teach guys, or what's kind of?
I try to keep that stuff fairly simple. For me, I've tried multiple different ways. We'll do ladder drills to work on quickening guys' feet, dot drills on the mat, those lighted dots where you guys make the feet work a little bit quicker, moving here and there. But for me, I'll go old school and take some duct tape or some athletic tape, and I'll put some hash marks on the ground and X behind the plate, make my spots. It's like, okay, here's how tall you are. I don't want you to get this wide in your stride with your front foot. I don't want your right foot to get this short. I'm going to make you work as quick as possible getting your feet up and down. And I'll have them sit there and I'll just think of tap, tap. I want your feet to move that quick. I want my right foot to get up, down as fast as I possibly can. And in your head, I want you to play that in your head. Tap, 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 tap. I want my feet to start moving as fast as I can. As I get that ball, or right before I get that ball, I want that right foot, boom, boom. And if I don't get that feeling to build that sequence or my rhythm for myself, I'm going to work on trying to create that quickness over and over and over and over again to where I feel comfortable enough to where I'm under control I'm balanced, and I can get a good strong throw off, because there can be some guys that are completely explosive out of their lower half and can be quick, that have zero balance, zero stability to get rid of a good throw, and they're flying everywhere, which I've seen that in showcases. Guys are super explosive out of the box, right? And they're gaining 2 feet in their throw. Man, but he's got a great strong arm, but the ball went over into right center. What am I doing with the feet there? Yeah, but what's the controlled environment? How quick can you be in that area? How fast can your feet be? So that's how we're going to work on. And we'll jump rope and all your stuff like that, working plyo boxes, jumps like that, working on getting explosive with the hips, the feet. But just something simple as that is work on that here, or even take it home. If you got square tiles in your house, figure out how to get your feet set apart the right way, working on taking that right foot as short as possible. Now understanding, though, if the ball's on my left side of my feet, I might exchange, or I might load, or rock and fire, or this, that, and the other. But to get my feet working as quick as I possibly can, I have to force myself to move. But then we'll also put some resistant bands with those guys, where one of my favorite ones is I'll get out in front of them with a bungee band. I can't remember what it's called now. It's a blue bungee band. It's not the core velocity belt, which we got one of those, but we'll do that at times. We'll connect it to them, but I'll get out front and I'll get the tension pulled on that bungee as tight as I can. And I'll tell them to go, and I'll yank on it. Mm-hmm. I want them to go. Those feet better get underneath you as fast as possible. You're flying forward on your face. If your feet don't get underneath you, you're not going to be balanced, and you're flying forward. So, I'll do stuff kind of like that just to get them to feel, how fast my feet need to be, so they can understand that's how fast they can move and be under control.
Yeah. Well, I would say that I kind of start in the same place. If I'm working with the guy for the first time, or I'm working with a new player, I feel like, there's a balance between the footwork and the mechanics and the arm strength. To be an elite thrower, you got to have both. And let's just be honest. If you want to play on TV, you can't have super fast feet and then a poor arm, and you can't it can't be the other way either. There's got to be a balance. But I think each player, kind of going back to what we spoke about earlier, where there's a little bit more individualization now. I think most players that I work with for the first time, they can make immediate improvements in their footwork and their exchange. And don't get me wrong, most of them can improve their arm strength as well, but that seems to take a little bit more time. Hey, if you're 15 years old, well, by the time you're 17, you're naturally going to be throwing 7 or 8, 10 miles an hour harder. Right. But with the footwork and the exchange, I feel like there are a lot of guys who can make an immediate impact, very quickly. Like, hey, if right now you're exchanging in 0.76 seconds, I feel like we can get it down to, 0.69 or 0.7. And that's a big difference. That's a very noticeable difference on a pop time. So,
and something you touched on right there on the exchange, I think that is a key that I think we need to look at in the showcase world as a better metric of how good a thrower is. Because those kids in those showcases, like you said, that might have a cannon for an arm, but how long is it taking for them to get rid of it? And it's stuff that makes in a realistic scenario too. I'm not going to be throwing a foot out in front of the plate unless I'm cheating on a pitch out, or I got a left-handed hitter up. I can't cheat that far out and get out in front of it, and my exchange might take forever. But I think for me, that's probably my favorite metric is for a thrower is my exchange time. How quick do I get rid of the ball under control? And if I look at that, if I got a kid that's a 0.73 and these are 0.75 or 0.76 and he's throwing 2 flats on the bag right now, or 201, hey, dude, that plays. Obviously I'd love for you to be better than that every time. We're going to work on getting better than that. But if we can work to stay there and build everything else up around that, man, who knows what we can accomplish, right? Yeah. I think that's one of my favorite metrics for throwing is that time right there, is the exchange time.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to think, I'm hoping the catching community does a better job over the next, number of years. One of the things that I kind of compare it to as, being a former college coach and watching a lot of recruiting videos, the recruiting videos have changed drastically for hitters and pitchers in the past couple of years. Now, if you're a pitcher, you don't even post a recruiting video that doesn't have a radar gun in it or a pocket radar. And a lot of times coaches want to see Rapsodo information too, because they want to see your spin rate. Yep. It's like, I can't even, I'm not even going to evaluate those. Okay, nice. So it's like, I'm not even going to evaluate your video if you don't have that stuff included. And catchers, there's one wide camera angle where the catcher's like this big on the screen and the second baseman's,
Mm-hmm.
a third of that size, and it's hard to watch the ball flight. So that's one thing that I'd like to see change in the catching world. I'd like to see the evaluations, and also just the recruiting videos kind of get a little more
Mm-hmm.
detailed and dialed into specific, whether it be with a pocket radar or having a stopwatch on the screen. But that's something that I think is important that most guys just aren't paying attention to quite yet. But I'm hoping that
Yeah.
trend changes over the next couple of years.
Have I sent you our showcase videos that we did from our first showcase we had, the MFRA one we had?
I haven't seen them, I don't think.
Okay, I'll when we're done, I'll shoot you a text of it so you can see kind of what we're doing. We've got a format after we've talked to some pro scouts and some colleges of what they saw from our last showcase, which we have our second one coming up here in the 29th. Our format is something, and it's just a catchers only showcase on this one what we do. So we call it the MFRA showcase with the move forward, rise above through All-Star. It's something just completely different. And the first one we had a great response from the colleges that came out and the scouts that came out, and we're got a second one going. I'll send you those. I think it's probably be like what you're talking about, what we're doing, and it's right along with it.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad to see you take charge and kind of start to do that. I'm hoping more, scouts and recruiters and college coaches, I'm hoping more of them
Mm-hmm.
start requesting that information, because I've personally felt like, over the past number of years, as I've, been a college coach, and now that I kind of do more, private type stuff,
Mm-hmm.
you see a lot of catchers that get passed over just because they don't have the flashy
Mm-hmm.
number. Maybe there's a guy that has a well above average exchange and his pop
Mm-hmm.
times are good, but he doesn't have quite the arm strength yet. So you see some arc on
Right.
video. And again, I'm probably guilty of it too. As a recruiter or a
Right.
scout, you see the arc and you see that guy doesn't have great,
Well, yeah,
arm
because
strength.
that's the sexy tool right away. Boom, that thing's on a rope. Okay, great, we can play with that. Well, the arm strength might have been great, but he threw a 205. But this kid over here was a 2 flat, and look how he's consistent with it. I mean, it's just it's what you see right away, the sexy stuff that you see, and then forget about those small details. I think at times.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think the catching community is changing and getting better.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad to see you kind of, leading the way with that, and hopefully more guys will take notice. I do want to respect your time. We've been on here almost an hour. I got a couple more questions for you, but you
Yeah,
mentioned,
no, go ahead.
well, you mentioned your showcase, and that was one thing I wanted to, I kind of wanted you to talk about a little bit. This is one of those things that, I don't mind, call it a plug, call it whatever you want. Just go into detail, kind of let me know what you're doing with the showcase, because I've seen it on your website and I've seen you post about it online. But I think it's an interesting concept, catchers only showcase. And I'm assuming that a lot of people listening to this are probably parents or actual catchers, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
even college coaches that might want to know more about it too.
Yeah, so our very first one we had followed our what we call our catchers instructs, which was a 13 to 15 week catchers camp that we had, and then we took our high school age group guys and we did a showcase at the very end for those guys that would be recruiting eligible, or for colleges to see the up and coming kids in their classes. So something that we do is we're setting aside trying to really highlight, if you will, the catching position.
Mm-hmm.
Because you go to a showcase, how many times the catcher, A might hit first, okay, great, or the throwing sequences might be okay after they've run or after they've played catch, and then they do their 60, and then okay, they might do this, and then they might start throwing. But we try to really, we have it set up enough to where it really details the best attributes of a catcher, but also we're showing everything that a catcher is going to need to be able to efficiently do or can do if they're playing in the game. I mean, as far as, you're going to field a bunt, you're going to receive, we're going to set up where you see fastballs and a curveball. You're going to have your throws to second or third into first, but you're also going to have it with a guy in the box. Some things like that to make it very realistic or a game-like approach. You're going to catch pop-ups. You're going to field some bunts, awareness of where things are going. And you get that all out of the way first, then we get all our stuff done. So that way, something we've had asked before from coaches is, sitting around the table having a beer or two, like, when do I ever see a guy really running a straight 60?
Mm-hmm.
What's a 60 time for a baseball player? Well, it's home to first to home to second. Well, okay, well, you've got a curve in there. If you're hitting a double, you're running home to second. You're not in a straight line. So we've got a concept where we use it where you're going to run, but you're going to run a home to first and you're going to run a home to second laser timed, where you've got to set up to where it's laser as soon as you hit the bag, as soon as you leave the gate and you hit the bag, that's your open to close gate. We've got things set up to use, certain technologies as far as 4K cameras that we use. We don't just get, like you said, the very far away shot. I mean, we hone in right on a catcher, then we zoom back and we get it to where it travels the ball right into a second baseman or to a third baseman. It's really going to just detail and separate everything you need to do as a catcher versus just sit around, wait, hit, do your stuff, wait to catch pins, sit and catch pitchers that might bounce 40 or 50 balls in a row, and all you're doing is blocking. You're not showcasing any receiving at all, which I've seen that through too many showcases with kids. I got some pitchers out there that might throw 93, 94, but, they've bounced 8 of 10 of their pitches. Well, how that kid received 2 balls and he's blocking everything else? He's getting worn out. I don't get a chance to see what that kid can really do receiving because he's bouncing everything. So we try to really help showcase what they're good at doing and what they can do or what they're going to be able to do. Because I've seen it time as a coach coaching our showcase teams and stuff like that, or going to colleges and watching a kid go after a pop-up behind the plate and have zero clue what he's doing, or I've been to college where a kid's come in that's a freshman and we do pop-ups or whatever the case is, and the kid looks like he's lost and on an island all by himself, having zero clue what to do. You're like, why can't this kid catch a pop-up? It shouldn't be hard. Maybe it's not a high priority play that's going to happen a lot, but you've got to be able to do it. I mean, and I think that's something that gets lost with a lot of stuff that we don't see in showcase tournaments or in games, or showcasing what a kid can do as a catcher, because shortstops, infielders all get everything they're going to do in a game, right? Your backhand, your forehand, arm strength, working the whole hit, run, right? Only thing we can't test for a catcher is their mentality and the game sense awareness, right? So, but if we just throw, which it seems like the biggest thing they do is, okay, you block 3 balls, you catch 3 balls, then you throw 4 or 5. You're done. Great. Cool. What did I get out of that? The kid was 2 feet in front of the box and he threw a 175. He's not going to throw that in a game consistently. There's no way his right foot's going to be on top or just right behind home plate, and his left foot's going to be 2 feet in front of home plate when he throws in the game. It's not realistic to me. And that's something I try to take into account when we do this, when I talk to scouts and coaches. What do you want to see a catcher be able to do in a showcase? What's more realistic in a video, if they get sent to you, that you would actually take the time to watch, that makes sense? Okay, well, I'm watching this kid throw. Hey, I like the feet. I like the exchange. I like the hands. Okay, great. Well, everything's there together. I can see what he would be like if, even if there's a game, I don't get to go watch him in a game, I can see in a game awareness setup what he looks like behind the plate. And I think that's something that we're trying to really detail in and send that out to guys.
And so, just to clarify, so it sounds like you guys are doing a great job there. That's for the coaches and scouts in attendance. But the catchers who attend, they're going to get a video that shows all that stuff too, right?
Correct. Yeah. So every catcher that comes out, so the cost of your event, and when you come to it, we basically get a shirt and all stuff. But we create your video for you. You get your video. We will create a YouTube channel link with your own video on it that you can share to whoever. Plus, we'll also take your video and we share it to every college that comes out. They'll get it. And then since right now, all the NCAA schools are on their shutdown till at least the 31st of July. Mm-hmm. Maybe they'll lift it, maybe they won't. But we're working on a streaming capability as well with our videographer to create a streaming option during the event if they just want to peek in and see what's going on. Mm-hmm. But they're also going to get everybody's video that comes to our showcase. So any NCAA school that we speak to, we're going to send it straight to them. So they'll have everybody that comes in on file. Every coach that comes on site will get a 3-ring binder, that has the kid's profile information, their GPA, their school, their height, their weight, the parents' information, all the contact things you can think of. But the ones that are there, they've got a notebook on that list that they can write down exactly what they get on the metrics that we pull from our Rapsodo or radar guns or wherever else that we pull. They can write it down and jot it down as well. But they'll also get printout data from the exact showcase as well to what we got on the the radar pop times or the velocities and everything else that will be as accurate as possible. And they'll get those as well when we're done.
Yeah, that's good. For me, the more information, the better. Is somebody
Absolutely.
who's trying to recruit a catcher or scout a catcher or whatever term you want to use. The more information, the better. I want to see it with my own eyes, but man, it's nice to be able to go back and watch on video and be able to break it down and see what his actual velo is and look at the exchange time. I do think I think catching across the board is attracting better coaches. And I don't mean that disrespectful to the guys who have, been coaching catchers for the past 20 years, but I mean, more guys are interested in it now. More guys are learning, more guys
Absolutely.
are, listening to podcasts and attending events and doing things like that. So I think we're having I guess the best term is maybe a more educated group of people who are evaluating catchers versus just looking at the pop time. So I think that's important. So for all the guys who are, thinking about an event to attend, I think it would definitely be a good idea. You guys are doing a lot out there, man. You're putting on showcases. Your facility is first class and looks great. What's next? You got any new plans? Anything that's coming up?
Hopefully we can, my wife and I can get to Hawaii for our 5th anniversary. Hopefully if nothing's shut down, which is our goal. If not, then we're actually in the process of an expansion right now, working on closing the next side, which would be an additional 10,000 square feet, where we'll basically be opening up an area to where we'll have, it'll be roughly about 135 feet corner to corner. So we'll have enough to go basically home to second, with it'll be a little bit tight, but you'll have enough room to where actually you can work from behind home plate and throw to second. Basically a 90-90 field, but we'll be able to use it to do, a lot of different things. Guys will be able to take ground ball, have some small team practices, have extra cages. We're going to build in a couple stationary clay mounds for our pro guys that come in. We've got a pro or a professional athlete program we're going to start promoting here pretty soon. We've worked with some apartment complexes to get them set up to where guys that live here or used to go in other places, since we've got our strength staff that we've got here, to be able to come in and train with them in an off season. So we're going to have a place to where we can put guys up, we can house them in apartments. We've got a plan to create their meal preps 5 days a week. The strength staff will be able to be here where we can privatize all of our pro or college guys that want to come in from October till they go back to spring training or wherever they want to do. They've got a place they can train, get their meals, do all their individual work they need to do, swing, hit, throw, everything they need to work on during off season, plus get all their meal prep done for them. And then we've got a couple of companies we've worked with to help them out for guys that might need a part-time job, stuff like that. But we've worked on a pretty reasonable rate. I feel that accomplishes that, to be able to pay for everything while they're here, per month, a per month cost, but it takes care of the housing. If they don't drive, we'll be able to shuttle them back and forth, get them where they need to go, all their food. I mean, pretty much everything you could think of. Like if you were to have been a guy that's gone to, back then it was called API, which I think is now Exos out in Arizona, which is something that I did when I was there. And then, or I've gone to Cressy's before when I was in Massachusetts as well, that kind of idea, but being able to do something, at home or here a little bit closer in the Midwest and offer some of the same benefits. Obviously we're not Eric Cressy or Mike Will status, but I feel we're getting really close to a lot of the pro guys that have been seeing the work they've been able to do with our strength staff and see the benefits. It's very similar. But I said, there's nothing taking anything away from Cressy and Boyle. So those guys are geniuses, fantastic. I mean, we learn from them on everything that they do, trying to make sure we're doing everything we possibly can to be online as much as they are, doing things the right way. And our strength staff is never stopping to learn. They're getting out, getting certifications left and right, staying on top of PRI, FMS, and functional anatomy movement, functional range conditioning. I mean, you name it, these guys are way smarter than I ever thought about being. And I have a bachelor's in kinesiology, but one of my, Charlie Green told me one of the best managers ever is like, you hire guys around you that are smarter than you and things that you may know a little bit about, but they know a multitude with, and let them just take it and go with it. And that's, Sean Barger is our guy. And Jason Smiley is one of those guys as well. And I just go, guys, that's your realm. You're going to run this part. We're going to work it together. what we do with what you do. It's got to complement everything we do. So it's SPI is the name of the facility that, or Sports Performance Institute, is what we base ourselves out of, but that's where that brings everything into a whole. That's kind of like I'm really excited to see that take off, because I think we've had a lot of good feedback from our pro guys that have been here already to do. We'd love to do that. Like, that's awesome. We could do everything all in one spot. We can be here, done. Let's do it. So that's probably our biggest, that and our expansion are like our two biggest things we've got trying to roll out right now. And it's been a day and night constant plan writing, prepping, meeting with the apartment complexes, meeting with businesses, you name it, trying to get behind them to like, hey, here's what we're trying to do, and do something here. It's going to benefit, these guys plus our market a little bit as well. So
yeah, well, it sounds like you've thought about every angle, and you've got it covered from the housing to the jobs to the you name it. So I'm definitely excited to watch that grow.
Thank you.
So
we'd like to have you come out too for we talked about our I think I mentioned to you before, our 13-week catching camp that we're going to have starting in November. So
yeah, that'd be fun.
Have you as a special guest, man.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I'd love to get out there. We got to get a workout in that gym. You got to give me a free day pass.
Absolutely. You got a day pass whenever you want to come in here. Just like everybody in that group I was telling, like, you guys come into Tulsa, just holler at me. We'll get in. So
yeah. Well, man, I appreciate it. Like I said, I definitely want to respect your time. I've been on here a little over an hour. It's funny how quick these calls go. Feels like we just got on here, but man, like I said, I enjoy watching the things you're doing. Sounds like you're making a lot of headway and doing a lot of good things out there. And hopefully I'll get out there to see you. But just one more time, please drop your info where people can find you online, social media, website, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm CJ Medlin with Midwest Catching Academy and Sports Performance Institute. On Instagram, we're at Midwest Catching Academy, and our sports performance is at sportspi.co. And we're also on Twitter with the same handles, and also on Facebook.
So awesome, man. Well, like I said, I'll put that on the screen so everybody can find you. But CJ, man, I appreciate the time. Thanks for coming on. Enjoyed the conversation, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Zan, thank you very much, man. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
All right.